I don't know, 51 or 52 they got it started, I think.
That
50.
early?
Yeah.
Huh.
They run NASCAR for a year or two.
At the airport speedway?
Yeah. Not NASCAR Sportman. You see, in them years, a NASCAR Sportman champion always come from this area.
Yeah, yeah. You built that one car for him, right? Bailey?
Yeah, he was a state champ, but the national champ come from Bedford, Ohio, and he run this Canfield, Ohio. Claypack, yeah.
Mike Claypack, that's who you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, we're gonna get started here.
Okay.
Squirt, this is a thrill, and your real name is Lee, right?
Stanley Lee.
Stanley Lee. Stanley Lee. And obviously we know you as Squirt Johns. How did Squirt become Squirt?
My mother, I guess, when I was long when I was born, and somewhere in looking at me or something, she said, "My little Squirt," and I guess I've been Squirt ever since. I was barely out of the womb, I guess, when I became Squirt.
Now your family, what did your mom and what did your dad do? What was his background?
He was a mechanic. Well, he went to work when he was 13.
Right.
Worked in Alcoa down Pittsburgh, along the river down there. Well, north of Pittsburgh, really. And then he came back and went to work for Albert DeMott and DuBois in Brookville, and worked there till 1955. He bought this building across the road and opened up his own place. And
his own garage and stuff.
Yeah. And
did he service trucks like I see you out here now?
Oh, at first it was mainly cars, but gradually it was almost all trucks.
Did he have an interest in racing? Was that
No, kind of. He never raced, but we started out. I don't know if you people know, but Wayne Bullers, who was a trucker here, who we worked for on his trucks, he built a race car for Don Bailey. That's the car we helped build, and Don was a state NASCAR champion for a couple of years, and I think finishes third or fourth in the nation too, and in the Sportman division. But this Wayne Bullers, he was a car man through and through all his life, and he's the one that started the late models up at Smithport when they started. He actually developed that whole 4 current model years they run, and that's what started late models in this part of the country on a Saturday night, a weekly deal, and. It was a booming thing, and he started in '55, and Smithport almost immediately. The grandstands weren't big enough, and it was a big hit right away, and I was friends with him all his life, all of my life. His life started before mine, but he convinced me. He hunted a car. He knew where there was a car down in North or South Carolina running. The car run Bowman Gray Stadium, which is kind of a famous stadium down in Winston-Salem or someplace down there. And he knew about it. I agreed to buy it, and he hauled me down there in his car, and we towed that car back that I started, and then I started running late models in '56 in that circuit he started up there, and then of course in them first years everybody wanted late models because they were, filling the grandstands on account of it, and it was something really new, and it really went over big. And
for the tape. When 1955, 56, what was the definition of a late model? How far back could you go?
Well, this fellow, this Wayne Bullers, when he started this circuit It was the 4 current model years.
Okay.
NASCAR late models were the 3 current model years. He added 1 more year for to evidently to get enough cars.
Right.
But it was amazing to me. To me, he's the father of late models, and maybe in the whole Northeast. I don't know.
Right. Right. Now, had you raced cars before then, Squirt?
Yeah, I probably raced maybe in 50 some a car I didn't own, a Model A coupe, you know, with no roof or no roll bars or nothing. It rolled on me.
Really?
Yeah, and
so this was sort of the jalopy races. Is that what?
well, they were jalopies, generally speaking, run as I understand them. They run on tracks that didn't really have a grade to them, you know, and they just made a path around the. Generally, jalopies went through a creek someplace or twice, you know, and to me, the first place I raced was at Clarion Park in the fairgrounds. It used to be a half-mile fairground track, and you could hold it wide open whole way around without any problem, you know. Yeah, maybe.
There's a picture of Wayne Bullard right there.
That's the man right there. You bet. Yeah.
Is he still alive?
No, he's dead now. But
okay.
He lost this man who, when he moved, him and Al, was it Basson or something, who was the announcer at Smiththorpe. Him and Wayne Bullard went to Florida, somewhere near Orlando. I think Lakeland. They bought land, made a track, and they lost them. They were as broke. They didn't have a penny left. They rained out. They advertised shows, and for a year and a half they had nothing but every time they'd plan a show and advertise it, rained out, and it broke them. I mean, broke them. This fella here, he told me he was running the road picking up pop balls to get enough to get along.
Now, if Wayne was from this area around Brockway,
he's born. Yeah, he was.
How did he end up promoting a race at Smethport, which is several hours from here?
I think it must have been. He trucked coal up that way. He was familiar with Bradford and up in Farmers Valley, probably, you know, the refinery there bought coal. And so I imagine it was on account of being able to make a deal with the fairgrounds, you know. And I never knew those kind of parts. I was a one-track guy. I was me and my racer, you know. When I raced, I never asked anybody anything. I read stuff in books, what I could, which there was none. But a car is a car, you know. And I never bought parts. I bought some stuff in California, but I never. Most of the stuff I bought from California wasn't reliable. And the one company, 2 companies had done business with out there was the crankshaft company, who made stroker cranks, but they were like a job shop too. I actually would call there and tell them what I wanted, and they'd make it to me. And then I run in these Chrysler products here. I run a Racer Brown cam, which was a roller tappet cam that guided itself from the cam lobe to keep the roller from. And it was a successful thing. The valve springs didn't hold up too good, but the cam was those 2 things that I bought from California were good. But in the Chevys, I tried some West Coast stuff in them and I had nothing but trouble. So my Chevys, except for maybe 5 races, I built an engine with a West Coast cam, a Chet Herbert cam, and that cam and that system just, it made shavings. It just destroyed that engine in 5 races. And pulled rocker studs right out. The cam was too radical, evidently, for the valve train, and it might have been all right in a drag car, but it sure didn't hold up for you. All my Chevys, except for that short 5 or 6 races I run that, I had to throw that engine away, by the way. All my Chevys were Chevy stuff. They weren't street Chevy, but they were all Chevy, you know, GM parts.
So 1955, you get your first late model car.
56.
56, excuse me, Smethport. We, shortly thereafter was the creation of a track north of here in Bustine, New York, called State Line Speedway. How did a Squirt Johns hear about a track which is 2 hours from here?
Well, I was racing across the hill. There's quite a story to that. I was racing at Skyline.
Okay.
And Skyline and State Line both run at the same time for at least 1 year, maybe 2, I don't know.
And that's Skyline is Sugar Grove.
Yeah, Sugar Grove. They're just across. One's about the same distance on one side of town as the other is on the other side of town.
Right.
And I just stayed with the. I hardly knew Lloyd Briggs at all. I knew Lloyd Williams. I hardly knew Lloyd Williams at all, and Leonard Briggs, I knew him a little bit, and the Frank boys, who were the other 2 partners in that track, I didn't know at all, and I'd been running at Skyline and was satisfied. I just stayed there, you know, and Leonard Briggs especially, he never forgave me for not. I don't even remember them asking me to come over to Skyline. I think they just figured I'd know about it, which I hardly even knew about what was going on over there.
That's right. You didn't race at State Line in '56.
No.
No, you were advertised in the newspaper to appear.
Is that right? Maybe I didn't even know that.
But you were never at the track in '56.
No, that's right.
Now you knew Leonard through racing,
through
right?
racing,
You
yeah.
raced against Leonard at Skyline?
Probably at Skyline. I don't know whether he actually raced Skyline, because he was like a promoter there too. And I remember racing against him at Clarion Park mainly, they showed me some pictures of his car. I'd even forgot what his car looked like, you know, but I remembered the man. But that Leonard, it might have been on account of that advertising thing. Nobody ever said anything to me about coming over there directly,
Right,
you know.
right.
And I went over in '56, and I was Leonard Briggs. He held that against me all our lives, I think. Never verbally or on, but he controlled some decisions that could be made against me, and and I felt the impact of that for years and years and years.
Well, in what way, Squirt?
Well, one year I think it was the year I bought some of that stuff from out west. I wasn't running very good, and that whole year I hadn't won or finished maybe better than third the whole year, and I was way down in points, but I was still starting last or next to last or something, because that was my reputation. And I complained to Jerry Frank, who was one of the owners, and Jerry said, "Yeah, you ought to be starting up further, you know." And I think they put me up to 11th or something like that. And they had a strike among the other drivers. All them other drivers from up there wouldn't run with me starting up there, even though I hadn't run good all year. And it taught me something about human nature too. But Leonard,
Did you get a sense because you were from Brockway that you were 2 hours, you're kind of an outsider?
well, that never bothered me. No, the only thing that ever bothered me was that well, those guys sided against me, you know, my competitors, and Leonard backed them up, and he was always a guy for when they made a decision. He was the strong one about sticking to it. I seen him one other time. They had a strike of sorts. He took the grader out there. The cars were sitting out there in the track, blocking the track, and they weren't going to run. And Leonard went with the grader, and they was either going to get run or get graded away, you know.
This is at State Line.
No, this was at Erie,
oh,
but
Erie.
they owned Erie too.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and I expected Leonard to act the same way when they struck against me.
Yeah.
But I ended up starting last that night.
Yeah.
But I finished third because I was mad.
Yeah.
They say most drivers can't drive mad, but my wife, she held a grudge against him, but I took it as it made me mad and made me try harder even, and I never, I mark it against him, but I bear no grudge about it, you know. And
So at some point though, he drew you, or something drew you from Skyline to State Line. Your first time?
well, I could see. I think I seen it dying, you know.
Skyline.
Yeah. And I think that's what it was, and maybe by then I'd heard about the purses were better over there, maybe something like that. I'm sure money would have made a difference. You know, I don't know this for sure, but I think after State Line got going a little bit, and they adjusted the purse based on the crowd, and they told us they did, that I think we made more money running State Line than you'd have made if you'd have run a 50-lapper down to Heidelberg in Pittsburgh or something. I never had actual numbers, but just from talking around to people, I think there was more money for winning a feature at State Line than there was at some of these bigger tracks.
That's what we were talking about in the car on the way down here today, Squirt. For you to drive 2 hours every Saturday night when there were many tracks around this area that you could have gone to, we were wondering what was it that made you drive that far? Was it money?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Once that place got going up there, and them guys had a good. Hey, they run a good operation too, you know. And
do you remember how much first place might have paid?
oh, I think even early it was up around getting up close to $300. And this memory of mine ain't the best, but I also remember that I used to look at the grandstands, and it seemed like when them grandstands was full, I run better that night.
The purse was a little bigger.
That's what I was figuring.
Yeah.
They eventually went away from that, and they had more of a standard purse, but that was a big enticement to me. There was that, purse-based, it would raise when the crowd raised.
Let me ask a question these two guys know this racing inside and out. But when you talk about the final race of the evening, and you talk about your position on the track, when you talked about being 11th or last or wherever they placed you, how would they place you? Was it based on points?
Yeah, they tried different formulas, but they eventually the formula eventually got tied to money, because points were the money went down, decreased in positions a lot faster than points. So it eventually got tied to money for a time in there, and that suited me better. I didn't mind starting back if I'd made the money, but.
So the guy who was the top money getter would start in the last? Is that how that was?
Well, it wasn't quite that. Yeah, the guy that won the feature the week before generally started last.
I see.
And last wasn't always, they started as high as 36 cars on that track, I think.
Wow.
I know they started 32, and it seems to me I remember once they started 36. So last was 22nd, I think, was last for a long time, and it moved up to around 18th, I think, and and then the slower cars started behind that, but I started not last. When I say last, I mean last, except for the previous feature winner most of the time.
Right.
And it made you. There was some good things about this. When you got to the front, it made you feel good.
Yeah.
It gave you some kind of and you didn't worry about them guys. When you got to the front, you figured you was going to finish there unless something broke or something,
I mean, I remember the track announcers saying "Squirt Johns from faraway Brockway."
Yeah, well, over at Smithport, that Basson used to call me the Sly Fox. I liked that.
Clearly, you're recognized not because of your success, but because you had an orange car.
Oh yeah, Squirt. Yeah. Squirt made a difference, I think, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had Squirt, 511, orange. Yeah. You had a strange number, you had a strange color, and then a name which was not your normal name. How did the orange come from? Was that a...
Well, this guy right here painted his car orange and black and put 51 on it, the very first one we made.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, this Wayne Buller's, and towed it to Butler. And that was a NASCAR track, and got there and there was a 51 there, Bunny Miller's car, and so we added the 1, and that's how it became 511. And then when he quit racing, well, we built a 512 too that my father's brother owns, supposedly.
Chuck Johns was your uncle?
He was my cousin.
Your cousin?
Yeah. And we built this 512, and then when Wayne quit, I built a car and put 511 back on it again. I don't think there was even a... I built a race car while I was in the service. I used to come home on the weekends, and she'd sit and watch me build a race car.
And you're still married.
And that was our date.
And you're still married. That's unbelievable.
Lola, you're the best.
You're the best, girl.
Gee, that's amazing. Was State Line, because you raced in several tracks, was State Line one of your more favorite tracks?
Oh, yeah, I always liked State Line. You could get down, you could run the inside pretty good there. Or I could run the inside pretty good there. I'll tell you a good story about the inside at State Line. Chub Frank, you guys all know him. But when he was a boy about that high, he used to run, of course his dad was a track preparer, and he used to run around driving one of them old jalopy cars to run the track in. And they had the inside run in, his dad thought, and he kept motioning Chub up to go up above, and Chub would come around the next time and he'd be down the inside. And finally his dad stopped him, and that's a big job for a kid that has to stand up to see out, to get down and hold on the steering wheel and push the clutch and get it into neutral and stop for his, And his dad says, "Why ain't you going up there?" "I'm running the inside in for Squirt," he said. So I always thought that was wonderful.
Speaking of your driving style, Squirt, and how you drove around the inside like that, I remember a lot of guys back then, they'd go like a bat out of heck down the front straightaways and sling the car through the corner. You didn't seem to do that. You
I
seem to
use
be
the-
more driving the car instead of slinging the car.
I always had the idea that, you know, when you put the back end out, you're using your horsepower to make the, you know, you're going north down the one straightaway, and you're going to turn around and go south down the other straightaway. And when you put the back end away out and spin the back tires, you're using your horsepower to turn the car. I always figured to use as much of the tires, the side bite of the tires, to turn the car, and use the horsepower to get down the straightaway. And now they got so much horsepower on these dirt tracks, I guess maybe my ideas wouldn't work. But that was always my goal, was to use the tires to change directions, and the side bite to change directions, and the horsepower to accelerate down the straightaway.
How did you learn that? I mean, is that something just from experience, or did you have a mentor?
I think it's just a logic to me, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. I think maybe it also worked better, you know. And I run cars with. Sometimes it didn't have a lot of power. I run some cars that had a lot of power, but I still used the same ideas.
You had a chance to race a couple of NASCAR races, and as I understand it, whether in Bradford, where they actually had a race or two there, and you were participating against the Lee Pettys of the world and others, Junior Johnson, who just got into the Hall of Fame. Tell us about that experience.
Well, it was a bad experience for me. They didn't pay. But yeah, you know, Bradford Speedway and State Line run a NASCAR show too. Mm-hmm. And Bradford, I went there, and you know, they had maybe 12 cars come to that track that were actual NASCAR regulars. There was Buck Baker, Junior Johnson, Lee Petty, and I don't remember the other guys in there, although their names would be recognizable. It just slipped my name. But Buck Baker, he spun me out when we was out practicing. I'm sure on purpose to let me know who was in charge, you know. And he didn't do me no damage, but he spun me out. He evidently was good at this, because I don't believe I ever went around quicker than I did when Buck Baker spun me out. and then I think I qualified pretty good. You know, they qualified.
Yeah.
I think Junior Johnson started first and I started second. And I ran second pretty near the whole race. Junior got out far enough. He never lapped us or anything, but but after 25 laps, I didn't have no brakes, because I wasn't used to running that. My brake system just wasn't up to it. And I used a lot of brakes. That was one of my, like you said, about going around the inside. Them guys, most racers, I found out later, don't use a lot of brakes, and I burned my brakes off all my racing life. And at any rate, I'm running without brakes, which is unnatural for me, and you got to coast down into the turn, you know. And Lee Petty's following me, and he followed me for laps and laps and laps. And I never did understand why he didn't try and pass me. But at the end of the race, you know, they hold up 10 fingers for 10 laps to go and stuff. I never seen that. Now, that might have been my fault, but I always thought maybe it was, they just avoided doing that for me. But about 8 laps, why, Lee Petty, which he could easily do, because I'm sifting down into the turn, leaving off a way back. He got down on the inside of me, give me one little route, and pass me. So now I'm third, and that's the way we finished. And I never held it against Lee Petty. I thought he was very. He was a thinking man too. He didn't like to do any more roughing up than he needed to, but he he gave me one little route there that got me up out of the way, and he could go on, and he had the right to go on because I was holding him up a little bit, and but then when before the race, I told him I got an electric fuel pump. Oh, that pit steward said, "That's all right. This is fine, you know." Then after the race, oh, my guys protested you, so we can't pay you. And what they were going to do was they were going to pay their own guys, and the money that was left they put in a pool and divided up even between the interlopers as we were. And I said, "You can keep your money," and I left, and it really burnt me. And I had another experience like that a year or so later, and for years I never left the tracks I was running regular. And
would you have liked to have gotten into the NASCAR world? Would that have been something that was an aspiration of yours?
I was a homeboy. I think I could have done all right if I would have tried it, but I don't believe I was used to that. In my racing career, I worked 54 hours a week, and I worked 54 hours a week. I don't believe in all my years of racing I ever missed more than a few days on account of injuries and stuff. And the racer comes second, even though it was in a way first, but work come really first. And I never took days off because I was behind in a racer. I just worked longer at night and something like that.
Squirt, do you remember the first time you ever won a race at State Line?
No, nothing special about it.
You were the point champion at State Line in 1961 and never won a race. That's consistency.
That's right. Yeah, that was that's when I first built this Dodge right here, and that was on account of a weak motor. and there's even a story to that. I don't know if they want to hear all this stuff.
Absolutely.
We want to hear it all, Scott.
And that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with motor manuals, but there's, in a motor manual, which is a car book, there's in the front of each, like in the front of Chevrolet, they have the Chevrolet engines listed. It lists the horsepower and the torque and the compression ratio and all that stuff. Well, we weren't allowed quick changes yet in them years, and I'm only getting I'm only running them Chevy transmissions 3 races, and they aren't broke yet, but I know they're going to break, so I get another Chevy transmission, all used ones, but I get another one and go through it, and I did that kind of stuff all my life. When something would break with 5 races, I'd say, well, it's got to be changed at 3, you know. And anyhow, these transmissions were getting more expensive and harder to find, and plus, it's a lot of work, and so I'm thinking ahead, and I read the motor manuals, and here's this 383 Dodge engine that come out in 57 or 58, I think 57 actually. It's a Chrysler engine. It's, the 383. It might not have been available in a Plymouth that first year or so, but it was in a Dodge, and it's what they call a low block 383. And in the motor manual, I figured out I could buy a 614 or 617 ring and pinion for an Oldsmobile rear end. And by figuring what the published numbers were for that Dodge engine, and then the gear ratio that I was running compared with the gear ratio of the Chevy, I figured I'd have more power going down the straightaway than I had with the Chevy, and based on the torque and the horsepower figures. And so I found this Dodge that a friend of mine wrecked without insurance, so I bought it off of him. And I had to get the 383 somewhere else because I think this had a 318 in. And I built this 383. All I put in it was that racer brown cam I talked about. And I'm figuring I'm gonna do good. Well, I do nice, but I don't do good. And it just didn't have it down the straightaway at all. It was reliable and done a good job. And so then I tore that engine apart and I measured everything, CC'd, which is stuff I never did before. I measured everything, and it was advertised at 10 or 10.25 was the advertised compression ratio. It really had 6.8 when you measured it out. The pistons didn't come to the top, you know. Hey, I think the production tolerances were left slack to make the engines reliable. I don't know, but that's when I started doing business with the crankshaft company. I called them and told them I'd measured this and I knew how. First off, I'm going to put a high block Chrysler crank in, which has a longer stroke. And so I went from a 383, I'm going to go from a 383 to a 452 in displacement. And but I also had to move the piston pinholes in the pistons, which Johns and them did that at that, so that the pistons would come almost to the top. And then that engine run like a bear. And still with the racer, same cam and stuff. And real bear, yeah. I run that 452 for 3 years, 3 full seasons, I think, before the crank broke. But the crank, all crankshaft company had to do was grind the mains down smaller to fit in the low block. It wasn't a stroker, but it was a...
These were all Dodges during this time period, right?
Yeah, from 61 to, well, in 65 or 66, I run a Plymouth. I think only 1 year for it, though. Yeah.
Let me throw some names out at you. Competitors. Tom Dill.
Scared the living daylights out of me. Oh yeah. He's a good friend of mine, and he had a bad time last winter medically, and I used to go. I had no. Somehow we didn't get into it at State Line, but I used to dread going to Erie. Sunday nights was terrifying to me. I'm thinking about this all the way up to Erie. For me to do good, I got to get past Tom Dill. and Tom Dill, he could do things with the car, and it was, in the first place, he wasn't fixing it, so he wasn't as careful about, he wasn't worried about when he hit something, and he was good, he had natural talents way beyond anybody I knew as far as. Yeah, well, I don't necessarily mean more racing talent, but he had lots of that too. But all other things, he just was, pick up a pool stick and shoot like he'd been shooting, practicing for months, and stuff like that. And he was one of them guys that's got so much talent you just don't understand where it all can come from. And but I dreaded going to, and this is no fabrication or no. I ain't trying to embellish this. I actually dreaded going to Erie I tried to never really back down, but yeah.
He'd move you out of the way if you had to. Huh?
Well, it was going to be a problem, and
we've talked to several drivers over the years, Squirt, Skip Furlow and Jim Scott and Johnny Whitehead and Ronnie Blackmer. We've asked all of them the same question: who's the toughest guy they ever raced against? And every one of them said Tom Dill.
Yeah.
Jim Scott said he'd spin out his mother to win a race.
Well, I always figured he had a little different idea of what was right and wrong than I did. And
Jim said that Dill would spin people out and then laugh in their face when the race was over because he thought it was funny.
And it was heartfelt. It wasn't, that stuff was all heartfelt with him. Yeah, he's really different from me, but I respect him and think he's got honor in his own way that you can, that's different than my honor on the racetrack especially. But yeah, there was one other guy that terrified me, and that was Bud Fiersdorf. And and go ahead with who you want me to talk
Bobby
about.
Schnars.
Oh, Bobby he was great. I always thought he was the smartest racer there ever was, because he run onto one kind of a chassis, and on any car he built himself, from then on it was the same car. Mm-hmm. And he stuck with that. Me, I built a Dodge and a Hudson and a Torsen bar Dodges and coil spring Chevys. I even run this Chevelle here had coil springs all the way around and stuff, and I'm always changing, thinking this is better and stuff. But Bobby was the smartest man, because he run the same thing, and I always thought he raced good, except for one year his car was pushing, and that's his. This car, I don't believe this. I never seen under this, and that's a big Chevy there. I think a full-size Chevy. But from then on, when he run a Rambler, it had a Chevelle chassis under it. The Dodge he run for the dealer up there, now that was a Dodge. But any car he built himself, it had that Chevelle workings underneath it, and I thought it was a smart thing to do. He was ready without experimenting,
Dean Layfield.
I didn't run against Dean very much, but I thought he was a real racer, but I always thought he got a lot more credit than he deserved from where I stood. His flair, I think, had a lot to do with that. That hell bent into the turn and stuff, and I honored him as a man and stuff, but I always thought he got a lot more credit racing than he actually deserved. And of course, he was into the late model business a year ahead of me and stuff, and that. But I thought he was just a hard driver, not necessarily. Sure, sometimes a hard driver wins, but I always thought smart drivers done better. I always thought I was trying to be a smart driver. I don't know.
Ronnie Blackmer.
Oh man. His father-in-law, at one time father-in-law, was the basis of his success.
Frank Ruhlman.
Frank Ruhlman. The guy was an innovator. The way he built the car, the chassis, welded. He's the first man. Everything in a Ruhlman car was welded to everything that was beside it. The body was welded to the frame. The frame was welded to the bumper. The bumper was welded to the fenders. This man must have burned up 10 million coat hangers. And gas welding is slow, and this was all done with gas. But he run almost totally stock engines, even hydraulic lifters adjusted so they wouldn't float. And but his cars were lighter and tougher, because it was like a car made in one piece, because he made it all one piece. The doors were welded continuously. The seams where the body, they were welded continuous. Not just up and down, the whole way around, you know. And yeah, Frank Ruman and Blackmer could drive, and he could drive an underpowered car, wonderful, you know, and get out there and put his foot in the mat and just hang on and steer and not waste, you know. In them cars, if you slid, you were wasting energy, you know. Slid too much. There's a certain amount of drift, but when you slide too much, that's a wasting energy.
Jay Plyler.
Yeah, really good. Had a powerful car, but he's been racing for I don't know how many years, and I'm watching him run his coupe one night. And he's been winning and all this. And here he's going down the straightaways at State Line, spinning the tires almost the whole way. He's almost the whole way down the straightaway before the thing quits spinning. And I must have been in a semi or something, but maybe not even that night. I get him and I talk to him. I said, "How come you're ringing the tires all the time? Why don't you?" And then Jay Plyler taught me that race drivers, there's hardly any of them that when they're ready to get on the gas, they get clear on it. And me, I always feather-footed, and anyhow, Jay, then he tells me, well, that's, yeah. And I tell him, well, you can go faster if you ease off and let him hook up and keep it hooked up, you know. And he come around a few weeks later and thanked me for. And then I found out Bobby Snars was the same way. He used to gear his rear end up in order so he wouldn't spin like that the whole way down the straightaway, so the power would like match the track. And I always run way more gear maybe than I always wanted to be able to spin anywhere I could, but never do it was my aim, you know. Almost do it, but never actually. Like running on ice. That's the way you run on ice. And I didn't realize, but I guess most drivers maybe don't. I remember Hal Russell. He used to, and maybe Eddie Kisco, they used to get in the turns and you'd hear the engine going, rip, 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 rip. Well, they're pumping on the gas. Now I guess that's a way of feather footing, but it ain't. I don't believe it's as effective as a steady. And then I noticed throttle linkages. Some of them, the foot feed only moves that far from nothing to wide open. So how are you going to feather foot a car like that? My throttle used to move that far from, and I used to make it so it would do that, you know. Lots of little things like that have a big effect on how you can run.
Skip Furlow.
Oh yeah, Skip was a cool guy. I just, you know, he was a cool racer, a heady racer. I always thought, and sensible, and with me it was, he was not only cool that way, he was cool socially and all that stuff. Me, I was kind of a cool racer, but socially and stuff, I was an outcast.
Well, just curious, when the race ended, you know, Saturday night, State Line, final race, and did you guys do anything together socially?
No, I was always, I always stayed and talked to the customers, you know, race fans that come to the pits. But no, I'm headed home. I was like an outcast, not outcast, but like an oddball, because first place I'm a teetotaler, and I'm not a fanatic about it, but I'm married to a boozer. No, she ain't really a boozer, but she drinks if she wants to.
We'll edit that out, Lola.
But I just never found Matter of fact, I guess I was without liquor long enough that it tastes terrible. I drove a car for them Indians, Jughead's people. I don't know, the one had a car dealer in Onoville, which is underwater now.
Pierce.
Huh?
Yeah,
Jug
you talk
Pierce.
about Jughead.
Yeah, well, Jug's, some of his circle of Indian friends, one of them owned a car dealership in Onoville. And they had a 57 Chevy there, and for some reason my car wasn't running or something. And I said, yeah, I'll run. They wanted me to run theirs, and I said, sure. And I come in from running the heat, and it was a bear to drive and really hot in the cab. And there's one of them holding a orange pop, bottle of orange pop. I said, how about a swig of that? You know, I'm steaming and my mouth's full of dust and stuff. I take that thing and I tip it up to take a swig, and it's spiked. Holy hell, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I spit it all over him. You know. And you know, that's how naive I was about that kind of stuff. And I don't know what the years was. It might have been 58 or something, 59, but boy, that's how unprepared I was for that kind of stuff.
Squirt, did you tow your car back home after a Saturday night and then turn around and go back to Erie on Sunday?
Absolutely, yeah. I tried. I had a pickup camper. I finally got a pickup, and I tried sleeping over up there, and you know, kind of going through the car up there someplace. I can't remember even where I did it. But I decided that wasn't working, and I only did it for part of 1 year.
I think Russ Thompson said you might have stopped at his house to do that. Is that right?
I might have a few times. I went someplace and parked, and then I'd try and get the car ready, but it was unsuccessful for me. I started bringing it home, and where had I knew where everything was and stuff. Yeah.
Let me ask you just a couple more names, if I could. Emery Mann.
Oh yeah, Emery was always different. Emery, you know, he was a successful car dealer, so he, of course I didn't know it then, but he's already organized. He's got people working for him, and these cars run good and stuff, but normally I figured I could beat him, but he was a good guy on the racetrack. He was a sensible driver and a good all-around guy.
Dave Turner.
Oh, I like Dave Turner. Yeah, I don't know why, but I always thought he was a real, you know, he was a construction guy, and I always been around machinery and stuff too, and I always liked Dave Turner. And on the track, I never had a bit of trouble with him. And you know, him and Scotty, them guys, especially Scotty, he worked his back end off for everything he got racing. And
Jim Scott.
Yeah.
The two guys from Kane, Pennsylvania, Hyle Russell and Eddie Kisco.
Yeah. Oh, they were. I haven't talked to Eddie for a couple of years, but yeah, I used to buy candy from Eddie in the.
Is that right?
Him and his mother run a candy store, and I used to go. I'd buy a block of milk chocolate, 10 or 15 pounds in a piece, and yeah. Ed was a prince of a fella, and Hyle, who I never knew as well, but they were both good guys in the track, I always thought.
I was reading someplace, Squirt, that it was not uncommon where at the end of a race at State Line that they would actually let the kids out on the track. How did they dare do that?
Well, it just kind of slid up, you know, the way I don't know if you're familiar with the way the gate was, but the flagman had a gate through the fence, and a little flag stand there on the outside of the wheel rail, but in other words, he was between the wheel, the main fence, and the guard fence for the track is where his little flagman stand was. Well, I think the way it come about was they started, when the feature was over, they'd let them little kids come out and stand between the guard fence and the track, the main fence, you know, the wheel fence, I guess you call it. And I guess one night they come out and started crawling in, and I said, sure, you know. And it got to be a big thing. When I'd win, I think they only done it to me, but they would come out, and this car right here, I drove that into the pits when it was so covered with kids. I had to back up to get up over the little hump to get in the pits, because it was dragging so heavy it would spin. And
that car had such a long trunk on it.
Oh,
there was a lot of room for us kids.
Was you one of
I
them?
rode on that car one night. Yep, you had a big long trunk.
Yeah, well, I today yet every once in a while somebody remembers riding with me on that car. I thought it was great, but I knew no insurance company would have ever approved it. And I think it actually, maybe for a couple of years, as far as I know, I was the only one that they'd do that. They left do that to, but I was proud to let them kids ride on it. Yeah.
Well, that was part of the great enhancement of you, and that's why I remember Squirt Johns, and that 511, the name, the color, that, and your popularity. I mean, you really gave back to the fans. So
I always thought that was the thing to do.
Yeah.
Much like Lee Petty, he was, he started that in the NASCAR. His son followed him up wonderfully, but Lee Petty, I remember that, talking to that guy at Bradford, and he had the personality. There was people come there, and he was talking to, they evidently invited him to stay the night, and I guess he did that all over. He'd stay with somebody after, and I don't know how that got started, but he was a personality man, no getting around it, and I could tell that just from being around for an hour or so there,
Did people ask you for your autograph? I mean, I'm looking right now at this here. Because I'm sure I have this in my own scrapbook. But was that a thing people walked around and were that?
Oh yeah, in the pits. When they'd come into the pits, Bobby Snars. After a race, he tried to hide,
Yeah.
But I tried to be accommodating to fans as much as, completely as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
Well, you have a special place in our family because you autographed this for my mother.
Is that right?
Yes. I don't know exactly
Well,
what year.
I didn't have a very good signature.
Might have been about 1966 in that time frame, but my mother, who was traveling with us to the races, was a big Squirt Johns fan, and she said after the races, she said she was going over to get your autograph, and it was uncharacteristic of my mother to walk up to somebody and ask for the autograph. So
yeah, well, I felt honored to do it, and I always wished I could have wrote more legibly, but
so that was your signature, and that was you.
The best I could do. That's right, and I got essential tremors. I've had it all my life, and that's my excuse anyhow for being that bad.
Having that, did that affect the driving at all? Did you have to do anything to accommodate that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm sure to run a screwdriver and stuff, there's certain things I learned to do. I slide my hand down the screwdriver and put my thumb on the metal or something, you know, on beside the screw to guide it and stuff like that. But yeah, but they seem. I don't even know I do it really. Basically, I mean now I know I do it because I shake so bad now sometimes. Well, like soldering, I can't solder anymore because you got the soldering gun and the solder and the and the wires or whatever you're trying to solder, and I can't get all in. Plus, I'm one-eyed, so I don't have the depth perception on it. And
now, did you hurt your eye? Was that during racing? Was that a?
No, right over here across the road.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What happened there?
Oh, I'm changing a universal joint right up in a good friend of mine's pickup truck with an air punch, trying to save time, you know, and the spall come off the end of the air punch, went right through the center of my eye, clear back into the retina.
Oh gosh.
And
this would have been about when?
Probably 70, 71, around there.
So you're still racing it? I mean, you're still racing at the time?
Yeah, there you go. Right there's the proof of it. Yeah, and
1970.
yeah,
You just won the championship at State Line.
yeah,
They gave you a car to drive that year.
yeah, they did. Yeah, oh, I didn't know. This must be a relative of Julian's here.
Yeah, that's Gene Busink.
Yeah.
Talk about Julian Busink.
Oh, you know, Julian, I never knew what a guy he really was. I never knew about all his NASCAR exploits I never did, you know. And when he's running up there, these guys, you know, Freddie Knapp and them, they all talk about him and stuff. But I don't get the idea that I just figure he's a Ford dealer who likes racing. I never knew that he run maybe as many as 5 cars in NASCAR races and stuff, but yeah, we'd talk a little bit once in a while, but we were from different worlds, so it never, you know, it never got to much. I never had anything against him, and as far as I know, he never. But for some reason, we didn't sit and BS or anything as much as I'd have liked to once. But one thing that made me really respect him was, of course, this is to my advantage, is I got mashed up really bad after the 100-lapper at State Line. Then the next day we go to Erie and run a regular show, and Erie's 100-lapper is going to be the next week. Well, in that regular show at Erie, the week before the end of the season, I can't remember. I think it was me and Parmenter and somebody maybe Lamancuso into the back end of me.
That's who it was, yes.
And I mean, the back end of the car come up past the back wheels, and the front of the car was kinked up. Yeah, there. I think I have that picture someplace. At any rate, I don't remember how I got it home. I'm sure I had to borrow somebody's rig to bring it home. And I used to, Lee Gosman, who used to be from Kane, I used to he let me use his trailer a few times, and I might have used his trailer that night. I don't know. Of course, he didn't come to Erie very often. But I made some arrangement, got it home, and figured, well, we ain't going to run the next week's too much work for just one night and stuff. And this Sunday. This is Sunday night, of course. Monday, me and Bill and a couple of guys got together, and late Monday we're out there in the garage, and some of the other guys, Tom Baca, who's was an ace welder of tin. He could actually weld tin with an electric arc. Good, you know, and we decided, well, we'll just make it so we can run one race. So Tuesday night,